I see Diego, Ilana, and I see you. Hello, boys and girls. It's Grandpa Maury, and I'm here to read a story. And today's story is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Mommies, daddies, teachers, and caregivers, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And now, let's read Goldilocks and the Three Bears. There were once three bears who lived in a wood. Their porridge was thick, and their chairs and beds good. The biggest bear, Bruin, was surly and rough. His wife, Mrs. Bruin, was called Mammy Muff. Their son, Tiny Cub, was like Dame Goose's lad. He was not very good, nor yet very bad. Now Bruin, the biggest, the surly old bear, had a great granite bowl and a cast-iron chair. Mammy Muff's bowl and chair you would no doubt prefer. They were both made of brickbats, but both suited her. Young Tiny Cub's bowl, chair, and bed were the best. This Big Bear's and Baby Bear's freely confessed. Mr. B, with his wife and his son, went one day to take a short stroll and a visit to pay. He left the door open, for, said he, no doubt, if our friend should call in, he will find us all out. It was only 2 miles from dark hazelnut wood, in which the great house of the three Bruins stood, that there lived a young miss, daring, funny, and fair, and from having bright curls she was called Golden Hair. She had roamed through the wood to see what she could see, and she saw gone walking the Bruins all three. She said to herself, to rob bears is no sin. The three bears have gone out, so I think I'll go in. She entered their parlor, and she saw a great bowl, and in it a spoon like a hair cutter's pole. That porridge, said she, may stay long enough there. It tastes like the food of the surly old bear. She tried Mammy Muff's, and she said, Mrs. B, I think your taste and my taste will never agree. Then she tried Tiny Cub's bowl and said, this is nice. I will put in some salt, and of bread a thick slice. The porridge she eats soon made her so great, the chair that she sat on broke down with her weight. The bottom fell out, and she cried in dismay, this is Tiny Cub's chair, and oh, what will he say? His papa is, I know, the most savage of bears. His mama is a fury, but for her, who cares? I'm sure I do not. And then as for her son, that young bear, Tiny Cub, from him shall I run? No, not I indeed, but I will not sit here. I shall next break the floor through. That's what I most fear. So upstairs she ran, and there 3 beds she found. She looked under each one, and she looked all around. But no one she saw, so she got into bed. It was surly old Bruin's, and well stuffed with lead. Mammy Muff's next she tried. It was stuffed with round stones, so she got into Tiny Cub's and rested her bones. Golden Hair was asleep when the 3 bears came in. Said Big Bruin, I'm hungry to eat. Let's begin. Who has been to my porridge? He roared with such might. His voice was like wind down the chimney at night. Who has been to my porridge? Growled out Mrs. B. Her voice was like cats fighting up in a tree. Who has been to my porridge and eaten it all? Young Tiny Cub said in a voice very small. Who has been sitting in my great armchair? In a voice like a thunderstorm roared the big bear. Who has been sitting in my good armchair? Growled out Mammy Muff like a sow in despair. Who has sat in my nice chair and broken it down? Young Tiny Cub said, and so fierce was his frown, that his mother with pride to his father said, there! See, our pet Tiny Cub can look just like a bear. So roaring and growling and frowning the bears, one after the other, came running upstairs. "Who has been upon my bed?" old Bruin roared out in a voice just like rain down a large water spout. "Who has been upon my bed?" growled out Mammy Muff in a voice like her husband's, but not quite so rough. "Who is lying on my bed?" said young Tiny Cub in a voice like hot water poured into a tub. As Tiny Cub's breath was so hot as he spoke that Golden Hair dreamt of hot water and woke. She opened her eyes and she saw the three bears and said, "Let me go, please. I'll soon run downstairs." But Big Bruin was angry and shouted out, "No! You had no right to come hither, and now you shan't go. What we mean to do with you, ere long you shall find. You can lie there and cry till I make up my mind." To Mammy and Tiny then did Big Bruin roar, "Go and block up the chimney and nail up the door. This Golden Hair now has gotten into a scrape, and if I can help it, she shall not escape." But Golden Hair saw that a window was there. It was always kept open to let in fresh air. So she jumped out of bed, to the window she ran, saying, "Three bears goodbye, catch me now if you can." To the window the bears ran as fast as they could, but Golden Hair flew like the wind through the wood. She said the bear's breath had filled her with steam, but when she grew older she said, "'Twas a dream." And no doubt she was right to take such a view. Still, some part of the story is certainly true. For unto this day there is no one who dares to say that there never existed three bears. The end. Mommies, daddies, teachers, and caregivers, please remember to like and subscribe. It certainly helps us out. And now, enjoy this sensory video set to classical music. I see Kim, Augie, Gabriel, and I see you. Hello, boys and girls. I'm Grandpa Maury, and I'm here to read a story. And today's story is Jack and the Beanstalk. Mommies, daddies, teachers, and caregivers, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps us out. And now, let's read the story. Once upon a time, there was a poor widow who had only one son named Jack and a cow named Milky White. And all they had to live on was the milk the cow gave every morning, which they carried to the market and sold. But one morning, Milky White gave no milk and they didn't know what to do. "What shall we do? What shall we do?" said the widow, wringing her hands. "Cheer up, Mother. I'll go and get work somewhere," said Jack. "We've tried that before, and nobody would take you," said his mother. "We must sell Milky White, and with the money start a shop or something." "All right, Mother," said Jack. "It's market day today, and I'll soon sell Milky White, and then we'll see what we can do." So he took the cow's halter in his hand, and off he started. He hadn't gone very far when he met a funny-looking old man who said to him, "Good morning, Jack." "Good morning to you," said Jack, and wondered how he knew his name. "Well, Jack, and where are you off to?" said the man. "I'm going to market to sell our cow there." "Oh, you look the proper sort of chap to sell cows," said the man. "I wonder if you know how many beans make 5? "2 in each hand and 1 in your mouth," said Jack, as sharp as a needle. "Right you are," said the man, "and here they are, the very beans themselves." He went on, pulling out of his pocket a number of strange-looking beans. "As you are so sharp," said he, "I don't mind doing a swap with you. Your cow for these beans." "Go along," said Jack. "Wouldn't you like it?" "Ah, you don't know what these beans are," said the man. "If you plant them overnight, by morning they grow right up to the sky." "Really?" said Jack. "You don't say so." "Yes, that is so, and if it doesn't turn out to be true, you can have your cow back." "Right," said Jack, and hands him over Milky White's halter and pockets the beans. Back goes Jack home, and as he hadn't gone very far, it wasn't dusk by the time he got to his door. "Back already, Jack?" said his mother. "I see you haven't got Milky White, so you've sold her. How much did you get for her?" "You'll never guess, Mother," said Jack. "No, you don't say so." "Good boy," said his mother. £5, £10, 15? Could it be 20? "I told you you couldn't guess. What do you say to these beans? They're magical. Plant them overnight and—" "What?" said Jack's mother. "Have you been such a fool, such a dolt, such an idiot as to give away my Milky White, the best milker in the parish, and prime beef to boot, for a set of paltry beans? Take that, take that, take that! And as for your precious beans, there they go out the window. And now off with you to bed. No supper for you, and nothing to drink this very night." So Jack went upstairs to his little room in the attic. He was sad and sorry, to be sure, as much for his mother's sake as for the loss of his supper. At last he dropped off to sleep. When he woke up, the room looked so funny. The sun was shining into part of it, and yet all the rest was quite dark and shady. So Jack jumped up and dressed himself and went to the window. And what do you think he saw? Why, the beans his mother had thrown out the window into the garden had sprung up into a big beanstalk, which went up and up and up till it reached the sky. So the man spoke the truth after all. The beanstalk grew up quite close past Jack's window, so all he had to do was to open it and give a jump onto the beanstalk, which ran up just like a big ladder. So Jack climbed and he climbed and he climbed, and he climbed and he climbed some more. And he climbed till at last he reached the sky. And when he got there, he found a long, broad road going as straight as a dart. So he walked along, and he walked along, and he walked along still. And he came to a great big tall house, and on the doorstep there was a great big tall woman. "Good morning, Mom," Jack said, quite polite. "Could you be so kind as to give me some breakfast?" For he hadn't had anything to eat, the night before, and was as hungry as a hunter. "It's breakfast you want, is it?" said the great big tall woman. "It's breakfast you'll be if you don't move off from here. My man is an ogre, and there's nothing he likes better than boys broiled on toast. You'd better be moving on, or he'll be coming. Oh, please, ma'am, do give me something to eat. I've had nothing to eat since yesterday morning, really and truly. I may as well be broiled or die of hunger." Well, the ogre's wife was not half so bad after all, so she took Jack into the kitchen and gave him a hunk of bread and cheese and a jug of milk. But Jack hadn't half finished these when thump, thump, thump. The whole house began to tremble with the noise of someone coming. "Goodness gracious me, it's my old man," said the ogre's wife. "What on earth shall I do? Come along quick and jump in here." And she bundled Jack into the oven just as the ogre came in. He was a big one, to be sure. At his belt he had 3 calves strung up by the heels, and he unhooked them and threw them down on the table and said, "Here, wife, broil me a couple of these for breakfast." "Ah, what's this I smell? Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll have his bones to grind my bread." "Nonsense, dear," said his wife. "You're dreaming. Or perhaps you smell the scraps of that little boy you liked so much for yesterday's dinner. Here you go, and have a wash and tidy up, and by the time you come back, your breakfast will be ready for you." So off the ogre went, and Jack was just going to jump out of the oven and run away when the woman told him not to. "Wait till he's asleep," she said. "He always has a nap after breakfast." Well, the ogre had his breakfast, and after that he went to a big chest and took out a couple of bags of gold, and down he sat and counted till at last his head began to nod, and he began to snore till the whole house shook again. Then Jack crept out on tiptoe from his oven, and as he was passing the ogre, he took one of the bags of gold under his arm, and off he ran till he came to the beanstalk, and then he threw down the bag of gold, which of course fell into his mother's garden, and then he climbed down, and at last he got home and told his mother and showed her the gold and said, "Well, mother, wasn't I right about the beans? They are really magical, you see." So they lived on the bag of gold for some time, but at last they came to the end of it, and Jack made up his mind to try his luck once more at the top of the beanstalk. So one fine morning he rose up early and got onto the beanstalk, and he climbed and he climbed and he climbed and he climbed, and he kept climbing till at last he came out onto the road again, and up to the great tall house he had been to before. There, sure enough, was the great tall woman standing on the doorstep. "Good morning, ma'am," said Jack, as bold as he could. "Could you be so good as to give me something to eat?" "Go away, my boy," said the big tall woman, "or else my man will eat you up for breakfast." "But wait a minute, aren't you the youngster who came here once before? Do you know that very day my man missed one of his bags of gold?" "That's strange," said Jack. "I dare say I could tell you something about that, but I'm so hungry I can't speak till I've had something to eat." Well, the big tall woman was so curious that she took him in and gave him something to eat. But he had scarcely begun munching it as slowly as he could when thump, thump, they heard the giant's footsteps, and his wife hid Jack away in the oven. All happened as it did before. In came the ogre as he did once before and said, "Fee, fi, fo, fum," and had his breakfast of 3 broiled oxen. Then he said, "Wife, bring me the hen that lays the golden eggs." So she brought it, and the ogre said, "Lay," and it laid an egg all of gold. And then the ogre began to nod his head and to snore till the whole house shook. Then Jack crept out of the oven on tiptoe and caught hold of the golden hen, and was off before you could say Jack Robinson. But this time the hen gave a cackle, which woke the ogre, and just as Jack got out of the house, he heard him calling, "Wife, wife, what have you done with my golden hen?" And the wife said, "Why, my dear?" But that was all Jack heard, for he rushed off to the beanstalk and climbed down like a house on fire. And when he got home, he showed his mother the wonderful hen and said, "Lay." And it laid a golden egg every time he said, "Lay." Well, Jack was not content, and it wasn't long before he determined to have another try at his luck up there at the top of the beanstalk. So one fine morning he rose up early and got to the beanstalk, and he climbed and he climbed and he climbed and he climbed till he got to the top. But this time he knew better than to go straight to the ogre's house. And when he got near it, he waited behind a bush till he saw the ogre's wife come out with a pail to get some water. And then he crept into the house and got into the copper. He hadn't been there long when he heard thump, thump, thump as before, and in came the ogre and his wife. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman," said the ogre. "I smell him, wife, I smell him." "Do you, my dearie?" said the ogre's wife. "Then if it's that little rogue that stole your gold, and the hen that laid the golden eggs, he's sure to have got into the oven." And they both rushed to the oven. But Jack wasn't there, luckily, and the ogre's wife said, "There you are again with your fee-fi-fo-fum. Why, of course it's the boy you caught last night that I've just broiled for your breakfast. How forgetful am I, and how careless you are not to know the difference between live and dead after all these years." So the ogre sat down to the breakfast and ate, but every now and then he would mutter, "Well, I could have sworn," and he'd get up and search the larder and the cupboards and everything, only luckily he didn't think of the copper. After breakfast was over, the ogre called out, "Wife, wife, bring me my golden harp." So she brought it and put it on the table before him, and then he said, "Sing," and the golden harp sang most beautifully. And it went on singing till the ogre fell asleep and commenced to snore like thunder. Then Jack lifted up the copper lid very quietly and got down like a mouse and crept on hands and knees till he came to the table, when up he crawled, caught hold of the golden harp, and dashed with it towards the door. But the harp called out quite loud, "Master! Master!" and the ogre woke up just in time to see Jack running off with his harp. Jack ran as fast as he could, and the ogre came rushing after, and would soon have caught him, only Jack had a start, and dodged him a bit, and knew where he was going. When he got to the beanstalk, the ogre was not more than 20 yards away, when he suddenly saw Jack disappear, and, when he came to the end of the road, saw Jack underneath climbing down for dear life. Well, the ogre didn't like trusting himself to such a ladder, and he stood and waited, so Jack got another start. But just then the harp cried out, "Master, master!" and the ogre swung himself down onto the beanstalk, which shook with his weight. Down climbs Jack, and after him climbed the ogre. But this time Jack had climbed down and climbed down and climbed down till he was very nearly home. So he called out, "Mother, mother, "Bring me an axe! Bring me an axe!" And his mother came rushing out with the axe in her hand. But when she came to the beanstalk, she stood stock still with fright, for there she saw the ogre with his legs just through the clouds. But Jack jumped and got hold of the axe and gave a chop at the beanstalk. The ogre felt the beanstalk shake and quiver, so he hightailed it up, 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 climbing as fast as he could back to where he came from. Then Jack gave another chop with the axe, and the beanstalk was cut in two and began to topple over, and so the ogre had no way of coming down to earth. Then Jack showed his mother his golden harp, and what with showing that and selling the golden eggs, Jack and his mother realized they needn't worry any more or ever go hungry, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Mommies, daddies, teachers, and caregivers, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps us out. And now, enjoy this sensory video set to classical music. see Margot, Diego, Sarkis, and I see you. Hello, boys and girls. I'm Grandpa Maury, and I'm here to read a story. And today's story is Cinderella. Mommies, daddies, teachers, and caregivers, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And now, let's read Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a gentleman who married for his second wife the proudest and most haughty woman that ever was seen. She had 2 daughters of her own who were indeed exactly like her in all things. The gentleman had also a young daughter of rare goodness and sweetness of temper, which she took from her mother, who was the best creature in the world. The wedding was scarcely over when the stepmother's bad temper began to show itself. She could not bear the goodness of this young girl because it made her own daughters appear the more unpleasant. The stepmother gave her the meanest work in the house to do. She had to scour the dishes, the tables, and other things as well, and to scrub the floors and clean out the bedrooms. The poor girl had to sleep in the attic upon a wretched straw bed while her sisters lay in fine rooms with inlaid floors, upon beds of the very newest fashion, and where they had mirrors so that they might see themselves at their full length. The poor girl bore all patiently and did not dare complain to her father, who would have scolded her if she had done so, for his wife governed him entirely. When she had done her work, she used to go into the chimney corner and sit down among the cinders. Hence, she was called Cinder Wench. The younger sister of the 2, who was not so rude and uncivil as the elder, called her Cinderella. However, Cinderella, in spite of her tattered apparel, was 100 times more good-looking than her sisters, though they were always richly dressed. It happened that the king's son was to give a ball and invited to it all persons of fashion. Our young misses were also invited, for they cut a very grand figure among the people of the countryside. They were highly delighted with the invitation and wonderfully busy in choosing the gowns, the petticoats, the headdresses which might best become them. This made Cinderella's lot still harder, for it was she who ironed her sisters' linens and pleated their ruffles. They talked all day long of nothing but how they should be dressed. "For my part," said the elder, "I will wear my red velvet suit with French trimmings." "And," said the younger, "I shall wear my usual skirt, but then, to make amends for that, I will put on my gold-flowered cape and my diamond necklace, which is far from being the most ordinary one in the world." They sent for the best hairdressers they could get to make up their hair in fashionable style, and bought patches for their cheeks. Cinderella was consulted in all these matters, for she had good taste. She advised them always for the best, and even offered her services to dress their hair, which they were willing for her to do. As she was doing this, they said to her, "Cinderella, would you not be glad to go to the ball?" "Young ladies," she said, "you only jeer at me. It is not for such as I am to go there." "You are right," they replied. "People would laugh to see a cinder wench at a ball." Anyone but Cinderella would have dressed the hair awry, but she was good-natured and arranged it perfectly well. They were almost 2 days without eating, so much were they transported with joy. They broke above a dozen laces in trying to lace themselves tight, that they might have a fine, slender shape, and they were continually at their looking-glass. At last the happy day came, and they went to court, and Cinderella followed them with her eyes as long as she could, and when she had lost sight of them, she fell crying. Her godmother, who saw her all in tears, asked her what was the matter. "I wish I could, I wish I could," but she could not finish, for she was sobbing. Her godmother, who was a fairy, said to her, "You wish you could go to the ball? Is that right?" "Alas, yes," said Cinderella, sighing. "Well," said her godmother, "be but a good girl, and I will see that you go." Then she took her into her chamber and said to her, "Run to the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella went at once to gather the finest she could get and brought it to her godmother, not being able to imagine how this pumpkin could help her to get to the ball. Her godmother scooped out all the inside of it, leaving nothing but the rind. Then she struck it with her wand, and the pumpkin was instantly turned into a fine gilded coach. She then went to look into the mouse trap, where she found 6 mice, all alive. She ordered Cinderella to lift the trapdoor, when giving each mouse as it went out a little tap with her wand. It was that moment turned into a fine horse, and the 6 mice made a fine set of 6 horses of a beautiful mouse-colored dapple gray. Being at a loss for a coachman, Cinderella said, "I will go and see if there is a rat in the rat trap. We may make a coachman of him." "You are right," replied her godmother. "Go and look." Cinderella brought the rat trap to her, and in it there were 3 huge rats. The fairy chose the one which had the largest beard, and having touched him with her wand, he was turned into a fat coachman with the finest mustache and whiskers ever seen. After that, she said to her, "Go into the garden, and you will find 6 lizards behind the watering pot. Bring them to me." She had no sooner done so than her godmother turned them into 6 footmen, who skipped up immediately behind the coach, with their liveries all trimmed with gold and silver, and they held on as if they had done nothing else their whole lives. The fairy godmother then said to Cinderella, "Well, you see here a carriage fit to go to the ball in. Are you not pleased with it?" "Oh, yes," she cried, "but must I go as I am in these rags?" Her godmother simply touched her with her wand, and at the same moment her clothes were turned into cloth of gold and silver, all decked with jewels. This done, she gave her a pair of the prettiest glass slippers in the whole world. Being so attired, she got into the carriage, her godmother commanding her, above all things, not to stay till after midnight, and telling her at the same time that if she stayed one moment longer, the coach would be a pumpkin again, her horses mice, her coachman a rat, her footmen lizards, and her clothes would become just as they were before. She promised her godmother she would not fail to leave the ball before midnight. She drove away, scarce able to contain herself for the joy she felt. The king's son, who was told that a great princess whom nobody knew was coming, ran out to receive her. He gave her his hand as she left the coach, and led her into the hall where the company were assembled. There was at once a profound silence. Everyone left off the dance floor, and the violin ceased to play, and so attracted was everyone by the singular beauties of the unknown newcomer. Nothing was then heard but a confused sound of voices saying, "Ha! How beautiful she is! Ha! How beautiful she is!" The king himself, old as he was, could not keep his eyes off her, and he told the queen under his breath that it was a long time since he had seen so beautiful and lovely a creature. All the ladies were busy studying her clothes and headdress, so that they might have theirs made next day after the same pattern, provided they could meet with such fine materials and able hands to make them. The king's son conducted her to the seat of honor, and afterwards took her out to dance with him. She danced so very gracefully that they all admired her more and more. A fine banquet was served, but the young prince ate not a morsel, so intently was he occupied with her. She went and sat down beside her sisters, showing them 1,000 civilities and giving them, among other things, part of the oranges and citrons with which the prince had regaled her. This very much surprised them, for they had not been presented to her. Cinderella heard the clock strike 11:45. She at once made her adieu to the company, that means goodbye, and hastened away as fast as she could. As soon as she got home, she ran to find her godmother, and after having thanked her, she said she much wished she might go to the ball the next day, because the king's son had asked her to do so. As she was eagerly telling her godmother all that happened at the ball, her two sisters knocked at the door. Cinderella opened it. "How long you have stayed," said she, yawning, rubbing her eyes, and stretching herself as if she had just been awakened. She had not, however, had any desire to sleep since they went home. "If you had been at the ball," said one of her sisters, "you would not have been tired with it. There came the finest princess, the most beautiful ever was seen with mortal eyes. She showed us 1,000 civilities and gave us oranges and citrons." Cinderella did not show any pleasure at this. Indeed, she asked them the name of the princess, but they told her they did not know it, and that the king's son was very much concerned, and would give all the world to know who she was. At this, Cinderella, smiling, replied, "Was she then so very beautiful? How fortunate you have been! Could I not see her? Ah, dear Miss Charlotte, do lend me your yellow suit of clothes which you wear every day." "Aye, to be sure," cried Miss Charlotte. "Lend my clothes to such a dirty cinder wench as thou art? I should be out of my mind to do so." Cinderella indeed expected such an answer, and was very glad of the refusal, for she would have been sadly troubled if her sister had lent her what she jestingly asked for. The next day the two sisters went to the ball, and so did Cinderella, but dressed more magnificently than the night before. The king's son was always beside her, and his pretty speeches to her never ceased. These by no means annoyed the young lady. Indeed, she quite forgot her godmother's orders to her, so that she heard the clock begin to strike 12, when she thought it could not be more than 11. She then rose up and fled, as nimble as a deer. The prince followed, but could not overtake her. She left behind one of her glass slippers, which the prince took up most carefully. She got home, but quite out of breath, without her carriage, and in her old clothes, having nothing left her of all her finery but one of the little slippers, followed to the one she had already dropped. The guards at the palace gate were asked if they had not seen a princess go out, and they replied they had seen nobody go out but a young girl, very simply dressed, and who had more the air of a poor country girl than of a young lady. When the two sisters returned from the ball, Cinderella asked them if they had a pleasant time, and if the fine lady had been there. They told her yes, but that she hurried away the moment it struck 12, and with so much haste that she dropped one of her little glass slippers, the prettiest in the world, which the king's son had taken up. They said further that he had done nothing but look at her all the time, and that most certainly he was very much in love with the beautiful owner of the glass slipper. What they said was true, for a few days after the king's son caused it to be proclaimed, by sound of trumpet, that he would marry her whose foot this slipper would fit exactly. They began to try it on the princesses, then on the duchesses, then on all the ladies of the court, but in vain. It was brought to the two sisters, who did all they possibly could do to thrust a foot into the slipper, but they could not succeed. Cinderella, who saw this and knew it was her slipper, said to them, laughing, "Let me see if it will not fit me." Her sisters burst out laughing and began to banter her. The gentleman who was sent to try the slipper looked earnestly at Cinderella, and finding her very intelligent, said it was for her to try, and that he had orders to let every lady try it on. He obliged Cinderella to sit down, and putting the slipper to her little foot, he found it went on very easily, and fitted her as if it had been made of wax. The astonishment of her two sisters was great, but it was still greater when Cinderella pulled out of her pocket the other slipper and put it on her foot. Thereupon in came her godmother, who, having touched Cinderella's clothes with her wand, made them more magnificent than those she had worn before. And now her two sisters found her to be that beautiful lady they had seen at the ball. They threw themselves at her feet to beg pardon for all their ill treatment of her. Cinderella took them up, and as she embraced them, said that she forgave them with all her heart, and begged them to love her always. She was conducted to the young prince, dressed as she was. He thought her more charming than ever, and a few days after married her. Cinderella, who was as good as she was beautiful, gave her two sisters a home in the palace, and that very same day married them to two great lords of the court, and together they all lived happily ever after. The end. Mommies, daddies, teachers, and caregivers, please remember to like and subscribe. It helps us out. And now, enjoy this sensory video set to classical music.